Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We are learning Mishnah Shabbos, Perek Yud Zayin, chapter 17, Mishnah Beis, Mishnah 2. I dedicate this morning's learning in memory of my mother, our learning Shemina Aliyah from the Shema of Shalamis, Basar Rav Yaakov Eliezer. Okay, continuing discussion of Muktzah. And that is the objects that we're not allowed to move on Shabbos. Now, any vessel, anything that its primary use is for something you may not do on Shabbos. A hammer. The primary use of a hammer is to build, to fix, and you can't use a hammer on Shabbos because you can't build and fix on Shabbos. So the primary usage of this vessel is something that you can't use it for Shabbos, but you want to use it for something that is permissible to do on Shabbos. So for instance, instead of using a nut cracker to crack your nut, I'm going to take a hammer and hold it and crack it. Okay? So the halacha is that anything that's muktzah, because it falls under the category of kali shemalachta le'isser, a utensil that its primary use is for something forbidden on Shabbos. So you can't just move it around. But if you want to use it for something that is permissible to do on Shabbos, you may use it, you may move it and use it then. Another rule is that if, let's say, that hammer, that kli shemalachta le'isser, is somewhere that you need, and you want to move it because you need that place, you may move it because you need that place. But if the problem is that you left your hammer outside and you're afraid that somebody's going to walk away with it, that you cannot carry your hammer for. So our Mishnah is going to be discussing this halacha and focusing on cases of things that are typically muktzah because their primary use is something you may not do on Shabbos, but you may use them for permissible use, and those are going to be all the examples in the Mishnah we read now. So Mishnah Beis. Noitel Adam Kornis. A person could take a hammer in order to crack open nuts. Right? Cracking open nuts is not a problem to do on Shabbos. The thing is, you're using a hammer.
But does he have to declare that he's going to do that, that this hammer is always available to him?
No. You don't need that. Don't need that. Okay? So you could just take any hammer, crack open the nuts. Or an axe, a hatchet, to cut a cake of figs. Now, as we've spoken about in the times of the Mishnah, they used to take the figs and press them and push them into this round utensil until it came out like a round cake, but they were all tight together and it became very thick and hard. So if you want to cut it, right? Now, typically they had special knives for it. But, you want to take your hatchet and give it a chop like that. That's how you want to cut it open. Mm-hmm. That's how you want to cut it apart. Mm-hmm. You can do that. You can use a hatchet to cut open the cake of pressed figs. Next example. You have this block of cheese and it's hard. So what do you want to do? You want to take a saw. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that will help you get through the cheese. So you can do that. Take your big, not your electric saw, that you can't do, but you got to take your saw, right? Two people on each side, and cut it. Magrefa ligreif payas agregris. Magrefa is a shovel to shovel out the dried figs. When you have this barrel of dried figs, you're going to get to the bottom of the barrel. So how do you do it? You take a shovel and scoop it out. But the shovel is a kli shemalachta le'isser. Primary use is for digging. Nonetheless, since I'm using it for a visible purpose, I can do it. Next, es arachas v'hamazlek l'seis alav l'katan. Arachas is a winnowing shovel. They explain that like this. This is a box-like shovel that has two low sides and a long pole attached to its third side. It is used to scoop up threshed grain and toss it into the air so that the light chaff is blown away while the grain kernels fall down. That's called zoyre, winnowing. Okay, and that's what this utensil is for. Okay, or the other example is a mazleg. Mazleg is a pitchfork. So what do you want to do? You want to use them to put food on it for a child. Now, that doesn't mean, you take the pitchfork and you say, open up. That's not what it means. It means, explain on the bottom, a case like this. And I guess they're saying it by a child because that's how it would be. You have this, there's a body of water separating between you and your child. Okay, the child is too small to walk through the water, but you want to feed it something. So you take something long and pass it on for the child to take off of so they'll have something to eat. That's what it means. It's not like you're feeding it with a pitchfork, but you're extending the pitchfork to the child with the food at the end, so I can take the food to eat it. And I'm assuming we're talking about a child because anybody else would typically be able to just, walk through the water and come. But it would be even in the other case also. But for some reason, I guess this was more of a, this would make more of a sense of a case for it to be. The child couldn't get through the water, and that's why you need something long to extend the food to the child. As hakush v'sakarka l'tchov bay. A kush is a spindle, which is a stick that is narrow at one end and wide at the other, used for spinning thread. And a karkar is a weaver's pick. And they explain that to be a pointed tool used to separate and straighten the warp threads in the weaving process. Okay, you got all the warp threads that are spread out, and you had this like sharp thing to keep them straight, to keep them separate, not to get tangled. And this falls under the malacha called mesach, warping. Not only extending mesach doesn't mean just extending the putting setting up the warp threads, but doing what it takes to make sure the warp threads are in their proper position. So they had this pointed stick, that pointed tool to separate and straighten the warp threads. So what do you want to use that sharp tool for? There's a strawberry there, and you want to stab your strawberry with it. Okay. The halacha is you could, because you're using what's typically it's muktzah, but you're using it what's called the tzarech gufay, to use it for permissible purpose. You're allowed to do that. Next example, machat shel yad lital bayas hakoitz. Machat shel yad means a hand needle, which is a standard needle used for sewing, and you want to use that to remove a splinter. You're allowed to do that. V'shel sakayim v'toyach bayas hadelis. The last example is what they call a sack maker's needle, which is a long, thick needle used to sew up sacks. You want to use it to open your door. You can't find your key. You want to use something to pick the lock. So you've got this large pointed thing to get the door open, even though it's muktzah because its typical use is for something permitted on Shabbos, which is to sew up a sack. But now I want to use it for permissible use. I want to use it for something that I may do on Shabbos, and therefore I may use this thing for that. Have a wonderful Shabbos.
Have a good Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a wonderful Shabbos.